John Sigman, welcome back to the Star Coach Show.
Yeah, I'm really, really happy to be here, Meg. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We were actually together more than 200 episodes ago, so it is time to do this again. We got together back in an episode 175, and we will have the links for that in the show notes. If those, as you're listening, you're like, "Ooh, I want more of John." We've got more of John on the Star Coach Show. In episode 175, it was actually about getting corporate business and how to kind of engage with decision makers. It was a great episode. Today's episode is going to dive into John's newest book, but the wisdom behind that book. So, your new book, Wild Leadership: What Nature Teaches Us About Adaptability, Resilience, and Intuition. So awesome. We're going to be looking at what do we need to be thinking about as leaders? What does nature teach us? And I'd love to know about sort of the path you've walked to write the book and the wisdom that bubbled up for you in that. So we are going to be diving into that. Stay tuned for that, ladies and gentlemen. Do want to let you know a little bit more about John and to let you know that if you're enjoying what we do here on the Star Coach Show, take a minute and follow us wherever you listen so that you never miss a moment of our incredible guests like John, the solo show that I do every month. By the way, you can join me for the live recording of that and just be a part of the recording the third Thursday of the month at 1 p.m. Hop on to Star Coach Show at YouTube and be there with me. Love to have you there. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel because we have extras there. We have shorts, we have my Tuesday tips. We have so many things on the Star Coach YouTube channel. So join us over there. Now, let me tell you why I wanted to have John on the show today. First of all, John was delightful in letting me know I've got this new book coming out. Could we talk about the concepts? And once he and I started talking about this whole concept of this untapped resource that we often have in nature to inspire us, to help us in our learning, I was like, yeah, John, I think we need to
Hmm.
talk about that on the show. John is the owner of Sigman Leadership Solutions. Makes sense. And in that, he connects people to their highest selves, to their own wisdom. He helps executives tap into effective business solutions, practical leadership applications, and really partners with them the way that we do as coaches to help them bring their best forward by bringing his best forward in his over 25, probably close to 30 years of experience in this realm. So who better to talk about these things than the amazing John Sigman? John, as we think about this concept of nature, I would just maybe like to start with what was it that motivated you to say, yeah, a leadership, I'm an executive coach, and yet nature is the thing that I'm going to zero in on this new adventure. Let's
What
start
a,
there.
first of all, thank you so much, Meg. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to be here and interact with you and the audience. And, for me, this work has been a bit of a slow burn, I guess is how I would characterize it. My love of and affiliation with the natural world really began when I was a small child at the foot of my grandparents who taught me in many ways a love of nature. And, sort of fast forwarding to when I started my career, I found myself in an office much like this one, kind of separated from the natural world in many ways, although I still had a strong affiliation there. So my journey was I really bifurcated those parts of myself in my coaching. And I think that probably if people listen to episode 175, they'll probably recognize that comparing it to this conversation. What happened was right around the pandemic timeframe, I attended a an offering, and I'll just drop a name here with David Goldsmith and the late David Peterson. And during that event, that learning event, what I noticed was that they used a lot of things like poetry and music and imagery in their coaching and how they worked with their clients. And that really started this spark, right? Of, what can I do as a coach to integrate these other parts of myself and bring a more fulsome and immersive experience to my clients? And also, by the way, right, nature is a free resource. So I have spent a fair amount of time kind of getting back into what I consider to be my roots as a human being on this planet, and also translating that into how it adds value to the clients that I serve, even at the C-suite level, and also how it supports me as a coach in this current environment that we're in. So that's just a little about the journey to how I got here.
I love that. So, if it's okay with you, maybe we start with your own transformation. What did tapping back into this element of you that is in there, but maybe covered up by all the other how we're supposed to be, and we need to show up a particular way, and when we're working with C-suite people, it has to be all tight-laced, and you've gone through a transformation yourself of saying maybe even questioning some of the beliefs that you held about that, and now leaning more fully into who is John and what are these important pieces. So do you mind sharing a little bit about that transformation that you've walked?
I really don't at all. So for me, it was, I'll just admit it, I'm a bit of a slow learner. So I decided to become a full-time coach, about a year or so before episode 175, if you will. And I had kind of a textbook way of coaching, which was really, really, I believe was impactful. The results I got from my clients and the results that they achieved were really impactful. But I just had this sense that there was more. And so it really started with this idea about who am I as a coach in this environment? And would there be value in bringing, not in an overt way, but bringing more of myself into those kinds of conversations? And so so what I started doing was, and it was really difficult for me because it was totally different from how I normally coached. And so what I started doing was just taking little baby steps with some of my clients, right? For example, I might start off a coaching session with just an image of nature and asking my client to just take a look at that. And what do you notice? What's your reflection as you see this image? And what I started to notice was, first of all, it helped kind of change the energy a bit, and it shifted a little perspective. And I'll put it to you this way, Meg. I guarantee if there's a coach listening to this conversation, I guarantee you that if you were to try a method like that, you would always get success. Every single time I
Wow.
tried something like that, it opened up something new. And so part of my journey was kind of getting over the fear that I had about going in that direction as opposed to kind of following the standard textbook model for how we coach, which is perfectly fine. People get lots and lots of results out of that for sure. But my belief is that there's something more there. And if we can tap into that and allow our clients to go deeper through nature, it opens up other possibilities and other perspectives for them.
What pops for me on that is first of all the stories we tell ourselves, right? Like I can't do that, or
Yeah.
so what is the thing that you're telling yourself, and where's the evidence to support that? So John was on his path, creating success, working with his clients through a more traditional route, and I think it takes some courage to say, what if I try, just experiment with opening sessions a little differently with a few clients, and what's the experience with that, and what that ultimately does is begin to give you evidence that is counter to the story that you're telling yourself,
Ah,
and
exactly.
experiences that reinforce maybe what your heart or your gut or whatever your intuition was telling you might be true. So that's a little bit about your transformation. Thank you for being willing to share that. What about the transformation that you saw your clients walking into as you courageously invited them into a different exploration?
Yeah. So it's been a range of things, and in many instances how I think about it and how I feel about it is just kind of it's a situational approach, right? So I have some clients, right, who are really, really buttoned up, right? And they're a little tightly wound, let's say, right? And with those clients, what I typically do is I rely back on my experiences with nature to help inform how I proceed with them. For example,
Thank you.
so someone may come and they may say, "Well, I'm having a challenge with this, that, or the other thing. I'm having a challenge with my board because I've got some difficult information I have to share with them and I'm nervous about it, whatever it may be."
Okay.
So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, for example, how does a river navigate its banks, right? What is the flow there that may be needed? So I bring up kind of nature inspired imagery that helps inform a question or a direction or a perspective that I might invite my client to share. So they're not really exposed to, hey, let's just take a walk outside and hug a pine
Right.
tree, right? It's something
Right,
a little bit
right.
different. So there's on that end of the scale. And then on the other end of the scale, it does involve things like, hmm, let's take a little walk. Would you enjoy a walk in the park today? And maybe we can find a warm place to sit and just have a conversation. Be a little bit different from our natural, normal coaching conversation. But what do you think about that?
Mm,
And 99% of the time, people say, yeah, that sounds like a really interesting idea. And again, just kind of going in that direction. There's lots of permutations in between there, like the image that you could share with someone and ask them to reflect and maybe invite them to a more reflective practice using nature as an inspiration there. So those are just some of the pathways that I've found that have been really successful with my clients that I serve. And what I've noticed is that when we go in that direction, other avenues, other channels open up because they're in a different environment. It's a different perspective. It's just a different energy. And it's hard for me to kind of put my finger on that.
right.
But if I could just add one other
Oh,
element here
please.
that's a little bit more data driven, right? There's a little bit of data and science to suggest that we inherit a lot of the wisdom from our ancestors. Right? We certainly inherit physical characteristics,
Right.
personality traits, for example, mannerisms, etc. All of those can be traced back to genetics in some way, right? Even at a cellular level.
Hmm.
So to me, it stands to, and there's actually a little science about trauma related to that as well, that's a little controversial. Nonetheless, my belief is that we have inside of us a deep knowing, a wisdom, and a great channel to tap into that is nature. All of our ancestors lived in nature. They survived in nature, right? They thrived there. They learned lessons from nature. All of that is within us. And I know that that sounds really touchy-feely.
I
And
think it feels pretty awesome.
part of the challenge for me is, I have this belief that, my clients think about me in a certain way, this buttoned up former CFO, former CHRO, et cetera, et cetera. And I was always afraid that if I brought this aspect of
Hmm.
my life to coaching, that it would not work, or I just had all these stories I told myself to your point. But the
Hmm.
reality is that none of that has proven to be true. All of the fears, all of the worries I had about this way of working and coaching haven't panned out. So I'm still on this journey. I'm still
Hmm.
exploring different avenues and different ways to really make a difference for the people that I serve.
So good. So
I know it's
let's
a
look
lot.
at, no, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. in that I love that you're bringing to us some of your own storytelling, some of the things you told yourself, some of the things you stepped into, and then would love to maybe look at your tagline of what it teaches us about adaptability, resilience, and intuition, how that has shown up in your coaching. So you've done a beautiful job of setting the stage. This is what I had to kind of go up against in my own resistance
Hmm.
because we that's just a natural part of doing things differently. We get a little anxious and we get a little nervous and tell ourselves different things. So now you did it anyway. You said, "Let me experiment with it." And you didn't say like 20% of the time or 40% of you're like 99, 100% of the time it has been embraced with full acceptance by my clients. So can we talk now a little bit about some of the results, some of the what how are you seeing adaptability? How are you seeing resilience? How are you seeing the intuition bubble up based upon your new offering?
Yeah, what a great question. And I, I, I'm not sure if I selected those capabilities or if they selected me. But nonetheless, my belief is that these are, among many others, the capabilities or the competencies of the future. You just think about for a moment all of the information, misinformation, disinformation that may be going on around us, right? And the
Mhm.
world that we live in, not a political statement, right?
Just reality, just
Just
the
the reality, just
reality.
it's just a little bit chaotic. So my belief is learning to rely on my intuition is going to serve me in a big way going forward. The more adaptable I can be, right, to the circumstances, being able to delineate what I can control, what I can influence, what I can change. And again, sort of using nature as a backdrop, whether it's metaphorical, whether we're actually out in nature observing, hey, this is how the Arctic fox does it, for example, right? This is how
Mm-hmm.
they craft adaptability. What lesson might you pull from that? So, some of the things that I've noticed is an uptick in people trusting, for example, their intuition. And again, there's some very practical sorts of ways as a coach that I can help my clients get there. Very, very simply, right? I have a hunch or an intuition about something. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to mark it down. I'm going to type it in my notes, and I'm going to come back and test that a little bit later. Was I right? What did I miss? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just an example of, and what I've noticed with my clients is they start to trust themselves a little bit more. They kind of stop looking always outside of themselves for the answer. They become a little bit more reflective, not wildly so. So, none of
Mm-hmm.
my clients are quitting their jobs and going off to an ashram somewhere, right? But they're just a little bit more intuitive and a little bit more in touch with, oh, I'm believing that this is a direction I should go in, or I'm feeling like. So, what I have noticed is I have a lot of thinkers as
Mm-hmm.
clients. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And they've started to kind of switch a little bit and kind of more balancing between the feeling, the intuition, the belief part of their leadership and the more doing part. So kind of that doing versus being piece. And so if we kind of put that on the scale, it feels more balanced these days than it was in the past, at least from my perspective. And some of the things I've heard from my clients would support that.
And what do you think you're doing differently as a coach to help your clients lean into their whole being?
Yeah, two things. A lot more invitations. So I have a lot more. If you're my client, what you probably have noticed over the last year or so is something like, I would like to invite you to fill in the blank. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one aspect. And then the other aspect of it is it has really informed how I have chemistry conversations. I still do that, and or alignment conversations with my clients just to get clear, right? Just so you'll know, Meg, if you were my client, this
Yes.
is something that I believe, right? I believe that a reflective practice is important. And I also believe that when we can reflect around the natural world, it opens up possibilities for us to work more closely together in partnership. Is that something that you would be interested in? Right. And when you tell me yes, off we go. If you tell
Okay.
me, you can tell me, no, listen, I'm not interested in that at all. That has no zero value for me. Great. I can always switch back to kind of the traditional coaching method that I'm really, really comfortable with.
Right. And I just want everyone to, sometimes we decide that's great. And I might not be the perfect coach for you. I mean, like, so part of that is us selecting both, who we want to work with and who our clients are we the best fit for them. So, like you said, you have the option, you can slip back into that traditional, but sometimes depending upon the number of people on your plate, the number of you might make a selection about who lights me up most to work with. And that's okay too. That's not a
Yeah.
judgment. That's not that's just a reality of who we are as human beings and the people that we work best with.
Yeah, exactly. And, I don't know about you or our listeners, but during an alignment session, I'll often let people know, listen, your company has assigned me as your coach, or you've selected me for some reason or another. But if you change your mind at any time, right, including today, just let me know. Right. Well, we will
Mhm.
definitely find someone else that can be effective and help you get to where you need to be, even if your company assigned me to you. Right.
Right.
Let's have that conversation. Let's just go back to HR or whoever your sponsor is and let them know, listen, this just isn't working. Let's find someone else. And I think that's a
Mhm.
perfectly appropriate and fine thing. And I mention that because I think a lot of people who have coaches and have been perhaps assigned coaches through their
Mhm.
organization might feel a little stuck. And
Right.
that's not necessary oftentimes.
Well, and I would just say, sort of more on a maybe metaphysical, that releasing of that energy shift can actually serve the relationship. It can serve just like, it kind of puts a like
Mm.
I'm back at my autonomy as a client, my ability to make choices for myself. That might just draw me closer to John. Like, yes, I want to work with John, but he's given me he's empowered me
Hmm.
that it's my choice. So I just, I think that there's a real benefit and value of that period.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, one other thing that I have really noticed a lot in clients since I've started doing this work and partnering with them around this is this idea of resilience. I think a lot of times we think of resilience as just kind of toughing it out, right? Where a lot of us are going through a difficult period, and maybe at work or at home or whatever, but resilience we often think is just kind of gritting it out. And I have a little bit of a different point of view about that and something that I think really resonates with my clients. And it's really not about just gritting it out. It's about how can you thrive, right, in adversity, not just make it, but how can you grow and learn and help develop yourself? And I use the metaphor of the olive tree for that actually, because you think about, olive trees are a staple in the Mediterranean agriculture and in diet. But if you are in the Mediterranean, you'll notice that the soil is really not even actually soil, it's more like dirt. It's just really barren and rocky and not very fertile necessarily. But the olive tree roots have to go deep, right, to survive and to thrive in that environment. And as clients and as coaches, we often have to do that as well. So that's sort of my message, I think, about resilience is we can all, it's difficult, but we can all find ways to thrive and learn and grow when we're faced with those opportunities to be more resilient.
Love that. I remember a couple years ago, I was at the Grand Canyon with my husband and a couple of my siblings, and I saw a tree just hanging on to the inside of the canyon. And yet, had leaves, and it was like I thought it was, how does, but it just was so resilient. It was gonna, this was its piece of earth, and it was gonna hold on to its piece of earth and grow. And I actually took a picture of it around resilience, thinking, how sometimes we might feel like we're on the edge of the cliff, but how have we dug
Mm,
in and really built? So another sort of, so many pictures of, and just great metaphors in nature about life, right?
exactly. Precisely. I love that. I'm visualizing that as you're sharing that. What an awesome image.
It's just so many things. And the other thing that you brought up that I just want to kind of lean into also is, in the face of that, there is a lot going on right now, and there is a lot of misinformation. It's just the reality. There's
Yeah.
misinformation. When you said that, I thought, oh, and what better to ground into than that is in nature, right? Nature is that big tree, whether you hug it or sit under it or enjoy its energy or its shade. That's reality. That is. And I think sometimes when we're caught up in what is truth and what is not, maybe nature has the lessons for us.
Yeah, I totally and wholeheartedly agree. I just as a personal note, I often, you know, coaching is lovely work, and I am passionate about my work. And we oftentimes in coaching, we talk about holding space for our clients
Mhm.
and kind of making that available for them to explore and do other things. And I often think about, what holds us as coaches. Right? I don't know about you. It can be a bit of a lonely journey, right? I'm here one to one with a client or one to many with a team, but nature has a resource to hold us, if we'll just allow it. And even if you don't have access, I'm lucky. I have access to lots of nature right outside my window here. But even if not, there's some science to indicate that imagery, pictures of nature, house plants, for example, have a similar impact, right? It kind of shift the energy just a little bit, change your perspective somewhat, and has a way of kind of holding us. And again, I know that kind of sounds a little fluffy for some of my corporate clients, but that's the drill, right? And regardless of whether it's me as a CFO and I've got a keyboard meeting and some difficult messages to communicate, or me as a coach, I've just had a challenging day and I'm feeling a little drained, right? What can I do? Well, here's a free resource.
So, unfortunately, our time is beginning to roll to an end, and I want to be sure that this concept of wild leadership and leaning into the lessons that nature has for us, that I'm sure we've had to leave some things on the table that we haven't been able to discuss, but what do you want to be sure that people really grasp as they walk away from this conversation? Maybe a little food for thought.
Yeah. So, what I hope people will take away from this is that using nature as your partner in life, whether regardless of what your profession is, has deep benefits. And I promise I'm not plugging the book, but if you read in the book, there are a number of micro actions you can take, a number of reflections that you can take relative to each one of these capabilities that we've talked about: adaptability, resilience, and intuition. So, what I want people to take away is that you have that capability within you. You have the capability within you to be wildly adaptable, regardless of what the circumstances are. You can be resilient and you can thrive in the face of adversity. And you have a deep intuition, you have a knowing. And guess what? You can trust it, right? It's there and it's been handed down to you. right? From your ancestors, from generations gone by, just like your hair color or your eye color or your mannerisms have been handed down to you. So at a cellular level, there's an intuition there for you to tap into. So that's what I hope that people will take away.
Oh, that is so powerful, John. Thank you for that. We will have links on how you can access John's book, how you can connect with John. John, what's the best way for people to just connect with you?
Yeah, probably the best way, the main platform that I'm on is LinkedIn. So you can please connect with me there. I'll respond. And also, I have a YouTube channel at Wild Leadership where I have a series of, 25 or so nature-inspired leadership coaching style conversations that I have. So you can
Oh,
check that out as well.
so good. I'm excited to check that out. And I want to once again thank you for bringing your wisdom to us. Ladies and gentlemen, as we're wrapping up this episode, I just want to reinforce the fact that the reason I do this show is to connect you with amazing people like John, who are looking through that lens of leadership, the lens of coaching, and giving us new food for thought, other ways to step into our courage, to step into what we know to be true and not cover it up and be afraid to bring it forward, to step into that space because we are all here on this earth together for a reason. All of us have our unique talents, our unique gifts, and when we combine those and bring them together, we are better together. So explore what it is that you're here to do and how you can combine your talents with others so that we can do the heavy lifting together. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Once again, thank you, John, for joining us and bringing your expertise forward because it's such a joy to have you here.
It's a joy to be here, Meg. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Everybody, remember, subscribe wherever you listen. I want to continue to pop into your box every Wednesday with a new show, every Tuesday with my Tuesday tips. And until next week, this is Meg Rentschler wishing you the very best for your success. Take care of yourself.